Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody's had a great week. Hope you enjoyed last week with our first Sunday. Worship was absolutely amazing, and I feel some momentum building in our worship. So be aware of that as you're even walking through your week and you're worshiping the Lord in your car. I just feel just an extra breath of Him upon our worship. So just be aware of Him because He's faithful to show up wherever you are when we declare His goodness and when we declare who He is. And Psalm 22:3 says He inhabits the praises of His people. And so be aware of it because He is showing up in those places. All right, this week we're going to continue on. We're going to continue on in believing, talking about righteousness and belief and grace. I'm going to come at it from another part. This week I'm going to come at it from the aspect of seeing, like what we believe versus what we see. And so I want to anchor us back in a verse. This is the verse. I continue to kind of let it roll through my head. If you go back to Romans chapter 5, verse 17, and everybody should be memorizing this verse. If you haven't memorized it yet, go ahead and put it in your memory bank. Verse 17 says, "For if by one man's offense death reigned through the one," so he's talking about Adam here, "much more those who receive abundance of grace and the gift of righteousness will reign in life through the one, Jesus Christ." And so we're talking about our belief having to do with how we reign in life. If we've received Jesus by belief. Now remember, go back to Romans. That's 5:17. Go back to Romans 3. I'm just doing a little bit of background here just to kind of anchor it, because I want us to stay anchored in this. Not that we're trying to, I just want us to get this in our spirit. Romans 3:21 says, and through about 23 or so, he says, "But now the righteousness of God apart from the law is revealed, being witnessed by the law and the prophets." So he's talking about that apart from the law, which was the measure of righteousness, that there's something being revealed about God apart from that. He's talking about Jesus Christ. Verse 22, "Even the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ to all and on all who believe, for there is no difference." Catch that verse again, verse 22. "Even the righteousness of God through faith in Christ to all and on all who believe." And so this righteousness that we believe that we have received has to do with how we believe about this. And I want to talk about today, as we talk about belief, I want to talk about how that belief shapes what we see. In other words, when we see things in our mind's eye, when we can look and see things, how do we see? Does our believing change what we're looking for? Does it change what we're actually seeing? Are we seeing a finished work? Are we seeing what we're praying towards? Or are we seeing what's in the natural? Let me put it another way. Are we praying the problem? Or are we praying the solution? Because Jesus, whenever He dealt with issues, He would, I was reading something this past week in one of my devotionals, He was talking about when Jesus was praying for the man with a withered hand. He says, you don't pray for somebody with a withered hand unless you see something greater at work. And so Jesus is talking about He saw him healed and He saw what was beyond the withered hand. And so as He prayed, the withered hand began to open up and healing came to it. And so today I want to talk about that, is how we see things. Are we seeing with our eyes in the natural, or are we seeing what the solution of what we would desire? Do we see that? Now, I want you to, when I do a lot of fishing, I wear a pair of polarized sunglasses. And so sometimes I'll be on the beach, and you'll be fishing on the beach, and my daughter will come up to me, and I'll say, "Hey, can you not see those fish like swimming in the waves right there? Can you not see those things swimming? Like they're just swimming all through the waves." She's looking at me like, "I don't see anything you're talking about." And I'll take my glasses off, and I'll hand them to her, and she'll put them on, and I say, "Now, look right there. Do you see?" She goes, "Oh, I see. I see." Now, those glasses simply were awakening her to what was at one point not seen to her, and she could now see. And so I want to say that as we believe, we have to believe beyond what we can see in the natural, because there's things in an invisible world that's the greatest reality. That's why we have, that's why that our faith isn't based on what we see, but it's that we draw things into being because we see something beyond the natural. Right? Remember, go back to Hebrews, and we're going to jump in. So 2 places today. I'm going to be in 2 places. If you want to go and mark your Bible, we're going to be in John chapter 20. And we're going to be probably verses 20 or so, 24 or so through 29. And then we're going to be in 2 Kings chapter 6. Be in the latter part of that. We're going to be in the New King James Version. So what I want to talk about in that, as we get into that, is the Hebrews part. Go back to Hebrews verse. Hebrews chapter 11. I did a message on this a couple of weeks ago, and it talked about how Moses endured. Like, in other words, as he had faith and walked things out, he endured. It said Hebrews 11:27. It says, by faith, Moses, he forsook Egypt. In other words, he left Egypt, left everything that was good, everything that was amazing, everything about his life, that he had all the provision, everything. He left it, not fearing the wrath of the king. For he endured as seeing him, talking about God, who is invisible. So part of Moses' faith was birthed out of seeing God in the invisible, like seeing beyond what his natural circumstances were. And this is where our belief has to begin to give birth to the greater reality. This is how our belief is shaped. Now, so turn to 2 Kings. We're going to be here right now. And we're going to look at a story here about Elisha with an S, not Shah, with a J. Elisha was the predecessor of Elijah. And in this passage, we're just going to kind of open it up and let it speak to us. I think this past week, I did a message around Romans 11:17 that said faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word. And so we'll just let the word do the talking, and we'll try to pull out what's in there. All right, so 2 Kings chapter 6, and we're going to start about verse 8. And then we're going to go through about verse 17, and we're just going to read it out, and then we're going to kind of open it up, because this one thing is if we are going to believe for the impossible, we have to be able to see the invisible. And that's not all the time in your mind's eye. Sometimes you actually can see an open vision, but if we're going to believe in the impossible, we have to be able to see into the invisible. Okay, 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 8 in the New King James Version. It says, now the king of Syria was making war against Israel, and he consulted with his servants, saying, my camp will be in such and such a place. So basically, he was sharing his tactics, where he was going to be in war. So he was saying, this is where we're going to be. We're going to be going here. So he's sharing his strategies with his innermost court. And verse 9 says, and the man of God sent to the king of Israel, saying, so beware that you do not pass this place, for the Syrians are coming down there. So basically what was happening was Syria was coming down against Israel. And basically Elisha was getting a download from the Lord about where they would set up their traps and their ambushes at. And so he was giving that intel into Israel, the king himself. And so every time Syria would show up in a spot, Israel would not be there. So verse 10 says, then the king of Israel sent someone to the place where the man of God had told him. Thus he warned him, and he was watchful there, not just once or twice. So continually, the enemy of Israel, they were essentially getting their mail read continually. I'll just pause right here and just say this, is the more we communicate with Jesus about the things going on in our life and about the solutions we're looking for, the more that he will continue to open up what's the enemy's strategy, what's his thought strategy in your life, what's his strategy from people around you. What's the strategy that he's working through work to get to you? So he'll reveal the strategy. So just know this, even in this story as you're reading it, know that your resources are outside of this natural world. The resources of the Father in heaven are outside this natural world, and they can be brought into this world and used. So know that since we're seated in heavenly places in Christ, and that Father sits on the throne, and Jesus is at his right hand, and we have his Spirit, that our intel and our resources are from outside this world to be used in this world. Okay. Therefore, verse 11, therefore the heart of the king of Syria was greatly troubled by this thing, and he called his servants and said to them, will you not show me which of us is for the king of Israel? Basically, he's going like, who is the leak here? Somebody is sharing information with Israel. But verse 12 says, but one of the servants said, none, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. Verse 13, so he said, go and see where he is, that I may send and get him. And it was told to him, saying, surely he is in Dothan. So verse 14, therefore he sent horses and chariots and a great army there, and they came by night and surrounded the city. Now listen, there at this point, you're thinking, okay, Elisha is one guy. He's one man, and he's sitting there, and he's reading the mail of the king. And so the king says, okay, as if you can sneak up on God, all right? Like you can sneak up on the Lord, right? Yeah, I'm going to sneak up on him. Now, I've snuck up on my kids before. I've hid behind corners and jumped out and surprised them, and they didn't know I was there. But you can't sneak up on the Lord. And so I guess he's kind of thinking, I'm going to sneak up on Elijah. I'm going to catch him when he's not paying attention, not like the Lord won't wake him up and make him aware of what's happening. So verse 15, and when the servant of the man of God arose early, he went out, and there was an army surrounded the city with horses and chariots. So his servant went out early in the morning before Elisha was up, and his servant said to them, alas, my master, what shall we do? Now, verse 15. I want you to think about in your personal life. All of a sudden, you've come across something in your natural circumstances, something in your day, something in your life. You've come across something, and you look at it, and you go like, this is insurmountable. This is not, how are we going to move this thing? Now, Elijah's servant here is looking around and going like, okay, my natural perception is I look around the mountains, all I can see are multiple chariots, multiple armies of people around us, and there's just you and me. And I am a servant, and you're just Elisha. So they're sitting there, and so he's asking us, what should we do? And so Elisha sees differently than his servant does. And so there's a belief that he's operating on. In other words, if you'll read behind 2 Kings, if you'll go backwards and read, you'll see how Elisha was encountered by the Lord and how he performed different miracles. And so he has a whole different history with God than his servant does. And this is what we're trying to get at now, even as we're walking through belief and righteousness and grace. We're trying to get into that place to where our minds are renewed and that our thinking is in the form of Elisha, to where we're not moved by our circumstances. We're not moved, that we respond in such a belief and a faith in a righteousness. Okay, verse 16. So he answered, this is Elisha speaking in verse 16. He says, so he answered and says, do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And so you can see the servant kind of, if you were seeing this on a TV show, you would see this real look come across his face, and he'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, do you have the same pair of glasses I have on? It's like the glasses that I gave my daughter when we were on the beach watching the fish swim by. I see fish, she doesn't see fish. He sees an army, Elisha sees the army of the Lord. So in other words, he sees something completely different or beyond what that first natural look was. He sees it beyond. And so Elisha's saying, hey, don't fear. The ones that are with us are greater than the ones that that you can see. Verse 17, and Elisha prayed. And I think that's the best strategy to understand what's happening, how the enemy is coming against us. The best strategy is to, what Elijah did was he said he prayed. He simply said, Lord, solution. What? He said, Elijah prayed, and he said, Lord, I pray, open his eyes, talking about his servant, that he may see. It's a great prayer to even pray in your own personal life, in circumstances and situations that are going on in your life, is, Lord, open my eyes so I can understand what's happening. You know, there's not a demon behind every circumstance, and there's not, the enemy's not behind everything. Some things are just there. But it's good to ask the Lord and discern. And sometimes our history with the Lord is such that maybe we're not hearing His voice clearly. So the more we ask, the more we'll create a history of hearing His voice, and He'll continue to show us things that we need to understand, so that when we ask Him, Lord, open our eyes so that we can see, He'll open our eyes. And so, like here for the serpent, He said, open so that he can see. And it says, then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. Now, I made a statement earlier. If we're going to believe in the impossible, we have to be able to see the invisible. And so we have to shape on what we're focused on and what we're seeing. Jesus saw a solution. He saw something whole and right. And so He prayed accordingly. Jesus, when He started His ministry, His first public ministry, His first public miracle was water to wine. And so when He was doing that, He knew that everything from that moment forward He was seeing was going to unravel all the way to the cross, all the way to His resurrection, all the way to His ascension. So He knew that once He entered into that place, He knew where that was going. If we're going to see things shift in our personal lives and in our communities, in our world, we have to see. We have to see. And we don't see something impossible happen. We have to believe by seeing. And when I say by seeing, it's not, I have to see it in the natural. In other words, we don't have to see something in the natural, because it's greater to have faith and believe beyond what you see in the natural. So in other words, when I say we're seeing by faith, we're seeing something made whole. If I'm praying for a broken leg, I'm not overwhelmed by the fact that you have a broken leg. I'm looking at your leg as it is in its whole state. So I'm seeing what it's supposed to be like, not what it is presently. And that's part of being able to see. Now, Jesus, this is where John comes in. Now, hold your space right there. Go to John 20. Because the servant here back in 2 Kings, right? The servant there, when Elisha prayed, he said, hey, open his eyes so he can see the greater army that's beyond what we see in the natural. And God opened his eyes, and he saw all the angels and chariots of fire and everything around. So he knew that that answer, that solution was going to be much better than just that natural army that was there. So go to verse 20, because we're going to see the flip of it right here, because it's even greater blessing and faith that when we can walk and believe, not in what we see, but in the invisible realm that we look into, that we begin to shape what is there, like what it looks like for something to be whole, what the solution looks like. So we pray the solution. Father, thank you for healing in my body. Lord, thank you for provision coming. And so we continue to pray that. We continue to walk in that. We don't give a long dissertation of what's wrong. We don't give a long dissertation for what our lack is. We begin to believe, right? Go back to what Philip talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago. He said, or actually about 2 weeks ago, he said, the Lord is my provider. Like He is. He's Jehovah, Jireh. He is my provision. He's Jehovah Rapha. He is my healer. So John 20, verse 24, I'm going to read this to you through about 29. It says, now Thomas, called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. And so he's talking about when Jesus began to show himself to the disciples after he was resurrected. This is after his crucifixion, his resurrection, and he's walking around. And some of the disciples have encountered him, but Thomas wasn't with him whenever he encountered some of the disciples. Verse 25 says, the other disciples therefore said to him, we have seen the Lord. So he said to them, unless I see, this is Thomas said, talking, he says, unless I see in his hands the print of the nails, and put my finger into the print of the nails, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. So Thomas has been walking with the Lord, and he sees Jesus do all of his miracles, and he was crucified, and he's aware of his death, and now when the disciples, the ones who they have done life with, they have walked for 3 years and watched Jesus do these amazing things, they have come and said, we've met the Messiah. Like we've seen him resurrected. Not only did we walk with him and we saw him crucified, but we see him now walking amongst us. And Thomas is saying, I'll not believe you unless I see it, unless I put my finger into his hand. Because that nail, the nail mark was probably like a flowered out section. So it's probably, if you were to look like this, the nail mark would have gone through there, probably actually gone through here, and it would have left a big mark on the outside of it. So he says, unless I can put my fingers in that, I'm not going to believe. And then verse 26 says, and after 8 days, his disciples were again inside, and Thomas with them. And Jesus came, the doors being shut, and he stood in the midst of them and said, peace to you. Now Jesus is walking through walls in a body, so it's interesting. So we can talk about that at another time. Verse 27, he says, then he said to Thomas, reach your finger here and look at my hands. And so he put his fingers there and put in his hands. He says, reach your hand here and put it in my side. So he put his hand in his side. He says, then he says this, do not be unbelieving, but believing. And listen to the statement that Jesus makes coming up. And then, of course, Thomas in verse 28, Thomas says, and he answered him, and he said to him, my Lord and my God. He says, you are him. But look what Jesus says in 29. And this is what I want us to grasp, because we think it would have been, if we could have just locked eyes with Jesus. Yes, would it have been amazing? Yes. To lock eyes with him in the natural, to hold him, it would be absolutely beyond better. It would be like amazing. But listen what Jesus says in verse 29, because it's going to line up with what we're trying to talk about what we believe and how we have faith and how we walk that out. Jesus says, Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen me and yet have believed. Those who have not seen me and yet believed. And so now, I know I talked about being able to see into the unseen and seeing what's in the unseen realm. And that's what Jesus is talking about. He said, blessed are those who haven't seen me in the natural, but have believed, have had faith. Because we have to be able to see beyond the natural realm, to see into the invisible, because that's where the miracle lies. That's where the impossible lies. So our belief has to continually be shaped by what the truth is, which will draw us into that unseen realm, and it will shape what we see. Because our perspective, what comes in through our eyes, things that we see, we have to be able to see beyond that. We have to get a higher vision. We got to go above and see, because our perspective, if it's only this way, is skewed. We have to be able to come from above it up here and look down and see what God is seeing, and use this truth to begin to continue to renew our minds so that we can see rightly with our eyes. So we can be like the servant of Elisha, and God can say, look, do you not believe that there's something greater around you operating, and that I'm here with you, that I'm your Jehovah Jireh, I am your provision, I am your Jehovah Rapha, I am your healing, I am your Jehovah Nisi, I'm your banner. Like whenever people see you, I'm your banner. The unseen world, when they look at you, see you as my banner. But do you believe and carry that? And so that's what we're talking about. Faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word. That the impossible sits out there, and our belief pulls the impossible into reality. It pulls it in. Now, if we go back to Romans again. Because the one thing I want us to be able to see in this is, as we believe, I want you to be able to see yourself as righteous before the Father. I want us to be able to see ourselves as forgiven before the Father. And forgiven, to see yourself forgiven and to see yourself righteous, means there's nothing held against us. There's nothing the Lord has against us, because everything that was against us, Jesus resolved. Everything that was against us, Jesus resolved. And Jesus says your work is to believe, John 6:29. Your work is to believe. Believe that you've been redeemed. Believe that you have been made whole. Believe that I came and offered a sacrifice perfectly. Believe that I have set you free. And part of that is He doesn't want us to get caught up in our natural mindset, that we continually see the problem, see the problem, see the problem. He wants us to not ignore the problem and not say the problem doesn't exist, but He wants us to enter into belief, and so cross over to the impossible side and see into the unseen and pull it into today. Remember Moses, back to Hebrews 11:27. Moses endured by seeing Him who was invisible. That's how Moses endured. So today I want to challenge us. What are we seeing? So what's in your mind about who you are? How do you see yourself? Like, how do you picture yourself? We need to see ourselves as redeemed and made right and whole. So therefore, there's some things in our natural lives that aren't lining up with that picture. So we continue to have Him refine us and work us in our belief in what we see. So we have to let that picture continue to develop. So for the things in that picture that doesn't match the character of Jesus, we say, Jesus, can I see how I am here, or can I see how to dismantle this part so that your character will show through there? So that when I have anxiety and stress, then your peace will come through there. Show me how to dismantle that. Show me the process of dismantling. Can you open my eyes and let me see what's actually there to be with me and to help me? And so part of it is how do you see yourself? How do you see your circumstances? How do you see your situations? We're not ignoring that something's happening in the natural, but what we're doing is seeing beyond that with our faith and our belief, and we're pulling into this reality what already is true as it is written in the Word. All right, discuss this today, and we'll keep going next week. Have a great week.